Commissioners. Just running just a few minutes behind, but I know that the quorum will be here imminently. And Commissioner Jackson, if you can hear us, we will vote in accordance with Blueprint IA policy at that time to authorize your telephonic participation under the Chair's direction. But in the meantime, thank you for listening in. So just a couple of very quick housekeeping items, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to go over.
Okay.
They're at everybody's place here at the table. One is a letter from Commissioner Deloge, who cannot attend, and the letter goes into both explaining that and also conveying just some thoughts that he wanted to share in a public forum with his colleagues on the IA. The second one actually relates to Commissioner Jackson, again, who is has work requirements but would like to participate both at the workshop and at the IA meeting. So again, when we have the proper quorum, we'll be able to, as soon as that happens, act upon that, if that's okay with you.
Okay, sure. So where are we now? We've had a couple of people come in. Are we at a quorum?
You might be for the city, but we need it for the county, I believe, as well. So we'll just hold off, and if it's okay with the IA, we can get started. There's a tremendous amount of information that we've prepared for you. Want to be, of course, cognizant of your time, if that's okay. So I'm going to ask for the next slide, I think, since that's all right. So, Commissioners, thank you very much. Really to start this off, I want to give some credit not only to the voters who approved this 2/3 margin, the Blueprint 2020 plan, but to you that saw it fit to do that, to put it to the voters 5 years in advance of the tax coming online. What has that resulted in? It's resulted in the ability to really amplify and be prepared to hit the ground running, not just on January 1st of 2020, but really in advance. So what have you done already? You've prioritized all 27 projects. You've given direction to advance fund some other projects. And you've given the direction just back in March to go ahead and prepare for financing options. And that's really the focus of today. We do have a pretty thorough presentation for you.
Okay.
I would ask, if it's okay, and it's the discretion of the chair, and of course, that maybe we go through the presentation. I think we may answer a lot of questions that may arise during it. But of course, if you want us to pause in the meantime, we're happy to do that. We also have our contract consultants related to bond counsel. We'll be discussing that for the first time in a while here today. But at this point, to kick that off, that analysis off, I'd like to turn it over to Blueprint Planning Manager Autumn Calder to begin the conversation and get the ball rolling.
Okay, and members will be working from this document that everybody should have. Okay, all right, Autumn.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is a summary of all the IA Board's actions that have set us up to prepare the 2020 implementation plan options for your consideration today. Early passage of the sales tax extension in 2014 provided the time to do the necessary analysis to identify the projects for annual allocations in 2015, and then to take advantage of some leveraging opportunities in 2016, and then by the end of 2017, you had prioritized all of the infrastructure projects. These actions lay the foundation for the implementation plan that you see before you today. Today, we're presenting 3 implementation plan options for the Board's consideration and discussion. Over the last 6 months, and under the leadership of the City Manager and County Administrator, we've tested many scenarios and have built towards the 3 options that are presented today. All options are rooted in the IA Board's direction to date, and upon the Board's direction at the end of this workshop, the implementation plan will guide us going forward into the 2020 program. This slide just provides an outline of the presentation today. We're going to go through some of the updates to the revenue projections and the project cost estimates. We'll also have a presentation from our financial advisors, PFM, on current market conditions, and they'll walk us through the process for development of a cost-effective financial strategy should you determine that bonding in the first 5 years be a part of this implementation plan. Ben will then take over and do an update on the economic development capital projects, which are the improvements to the Tallahassee International Airport and the Convention Center. And then we'll present a strategy for continuing to evaluate and analyze any potential leveraging opportunities. Very quickly, let's just take a look at how the sales tax revenues are allocated. 10% right off the top to the city and the county, 2% to the LIFE projects, and then 78% to the Blueprint Intergovernmental Agency. Of that, 12% goes to the Economic Development Program, and then 66% to the infrastructure side. And it's that 66% that we're going to focus on today with the implementation.
Autumn, would you let the audience know what LIFE
Yes.
is an acronym for?
Livable Infrastructure for Everyone.
And what does that do?
Let's see, it provides projects like sidewalk connectivity, and it's going to go to Leon County to implement those projects.
At the unincorporated area.
All right, thank you. Just wanted to make sure everybody
I had a
was.
question on that. You mentioned the unincorporated area. What about county roads within the city?
Well,
Just, you don't have to get back. I'm not going to hold, I see you don't have a ready answer, so we'll move on.
Yeah, we'll
But I would
get
like
you
to
an
know the
answer to
answer to
that,
that.
Commissioner Miller. Sure. All right. Okay, Autumn.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's take these percentages and turn them into dollars. The final sales tax revenues for the Blueprint 2000 program total $43.5 million. The Blueprint 2020 infrastructure will receive on average about $30 million per year over that first 5 years, and economic development will receive between $5 and $6 million per year. While it was advantageous for us to begin our planning in 2014, it does a disadvantage to use the 2014 cost estimates. To provide more accurate implementation plan, we increased our project costs by 2% beginning in 2015. However, upon initiation of the individual projects, these cost estimates will be updated as we refine the concepts and move them into construction. Two of the bond options presented today include the utilization of a bond, or two of the options presented today include the utilization of a bond to accelerate the implementation of the large-scale regional roadway projects. The bond options presented today were developed with assistance from PFM, who prepared an analysis of our bonding capacity, several different iterations of debt servicing programs, and they're here today to give us a presentation on the current market and finance process. And today we have Jeremy Needfelt from PFM.
Thank you, Autumn. Again, Jeremy Needfelt. I'm a director with PFM, financial advisor. And Mr. Chair, fellow commissioners, appreciate the opportunity to speak. We're going to do a real brief municipal market overview. If there are questions along the way, please feel free to interject and ask them, and I'll try and answer them on the spot. We're not trying to give you a whole lot of detail, but just wanted to show some trends in the market, and then we're also going to follow that up with a plan of finance discussion. As widely known, over the last year and a half, the Fed funds target rate has been steadily increasing. This is a benchmark for short-term interest rates. So as we achieve, what the Fed targets is maximum employment, those rates have increased, and the first increase was about 2.5 years ago. It's expected that that will continue to increase as maximum employment is reached. Right now, the target is at 2% after the recent increase a couple of weeks ago. Long-term interest rates is probably a little more important for the long-term planning process that the agency has been going through. As you can see here, the current market interest rates are the blue line on top, approximately 1% higher than where rates were about 2 years ago. The yellow line represents where rates were a year ago, and this is long-term, so this is from 1 to 30 years, and you can see the short-term rates have increased more on the front end of the curve than they have on the long end of the curve. For a more historical perspective, we showed the 10-year rate. So the red lines here, the red bars here, show the range of where interest rates have been for 1 through 30 years over the last 10 years. You can see, again, the blue lines represent where current market interest rates are, and the yellow represents the averages over the last 10 years. 10 years and in, you can see that current rates are above and well above on the short end where the average has been the last 10 years. And when you get out past 10 years, interest rates are actually still lower than what the average is over the last 10 years, by as much as 300 basis points or 3% lower on the long end. If there are any questions on current market interest rates or anything to that effect, I'll take them now, or we can move on to plan of finance discussion.
Any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The finance process is a long process. As mentioned earlier, your core finance team was put in place over a year ago. So financial advisor, bond counsel, disclosure were put in place to start talking through the strategies of the implementation plan and what needs to be brought to the table for options to consider. The plan of finance can take several years, so there's still many more months and years ahead to work through. Once you get to the legal framework of a financing process, you have 5 or 6 months. So to do the legal framework component of the plan of finance and then to access capital markets could take as much as 5 to 6 months or longer, depending on discussions here with quarterly meetings. Sometimes we build in a couple extra months in that process just to make sure we have due process with the board here through the agency. Closing and administration, that exists and extends out till when the bonds are finally matured. So that could be 20, 21 years from now. The plan of finance development has, obviously several steps, but the purpose is to develop the most cost-effective financing strategy. The goal is to monitor cash flows and to forecast when financing needs are required, and then to look at the alternatives that make the most sense in then current market conditions. The plan of finance is presented to the board well in advance of when funding is required, and typically that's 6 months or more. And along the way in that plan of finance towards the pricing of public debt, the credit rating process is integral to achieving the lowest cost of capital. Timing considerations is something that has already begun and built into the implementation plan options. It's something that agency staff has made sure was discussed, particularly with bond counsel and us along the way. The model tracks current projected cash balances, and debt issuance is driven by the financing needs, which is for us still pretty well out in the future. When it makes sense to move forward and there are some needs that are required, a reimbursement resolution can be put in place to go ahead and advance fund prior to a debt transaction actually closing for tax-exempt bonds. Staff knows that there's a 3-year horizon for tax-exempt proceeds to be spent to ensure IRS regulations are met. Financing alternatives exist for short-term and interim financing alternatives, such as a line of credit or a bond anticipation note. There's also long-term debt options, which include variable rate, commercial paper. Those are variable rate options, privately placed bank loans, and what's traditionally been used by the agency with long-term debt or fixed-rate bonds. Current bond ratings are strong, very strong, in the AA category. With prudent management practices and good financial metrics, the AA credit actually achieves very low cost of funding. It also provides access to capital markets that wouldn't otherwise exist if you didn't have a strong financial picture. Bond credit ratings directly impact the cost of borrowing. For example, if you were 2 categories off, a $100 million financing would cost about $5 million or more over a 20-year horizon. So the costs are significant if you can't maintain the AA ratings, which the plans that are being considered here would maintain high credit quality. To wrap up the discussion, for market and for plan of finance, what does that mean to the agency? Well, the option that's presented here and approved here is going to be taken to develop a cost-effective strategy. It's developed based on projecting the spending needs for both PAYGO and debt financing. Market conditions are monitored along the way, and the model is updated for changing current market conditions. The recommended financing alternatives that are going to be presented in the future are meant to maximize the amount of sales tax revenues that will be available for projects. That concludes my prepared presentation. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay. Members, any questions of Patrick?
So what are you talking about?
Commissioner Proctor?
What is he talking about? What projects on the table today? I'm looking at table 5, table 6 and 7.
Yes, sir.
Option A, option B, and what I'm looking at is these bottom tiered projects on A and B. I mean, all of these projects are not funded for 5 years. I'm looking at the first 14 projects. I'm trying to understand what we're talking about today, because all of these projects ahead of Woodville, Orange Avenue, FAMU entry points, the fairgrounds. What kind of stuff, what's going on here today? I don't understand what's happening. We're here to do what? I need some help in understanding. We're saying that these projects from 14 down to 20, down to the bottom there, ain't getting some money. What were we saying today? I need to understand it.
Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I am going to address actually where you're going in the next segment of this very same presentation to a certain extent, and if I don't, we're going to come back to it. The presentation from our bond counsel really was just to give an overview before the IA has the conversation. As you look at what options are available to you to finance and to fund, starting in 2020, your 27 projects, is to give you some comfort and clarity as to what your capacity to bond is, what your rating is, and what you should feel comfortable entering into the bond market. And you can add to this, Jeremy, if I'm misstating this, but it really, before we start getting into your point, which is, okay, what projects are we talking about? We wanted to provide an opportunity to have your contract consultant just sort of paint the picture of where the bond market is going in general and what Blueprint IA's position is, which is good. A good position.
Well, Chairman, I'm just not comfortable with what I'm seeing, the way staff is lining this up, and I've never seen this alignment. I've never seen any projection about what's in front of me today. So we'll hear the rest of it. We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. Next slide, please. All right. So, Commissioners, in summary, based on the presentation that you just had, and I was taking notes here as well as Jeremy was speaking, I think if I were to synopsize sort of at a high level what you just heard, it is that the market conditions, bond market conditions, are advantageous at this point in time for the board to consider bond financing. A process is clearly in place and has already been acted on by the IA to engage in that. Blueprint, intergovernmental agency, has a great rating. And the bond capacity. You have not taken those actions in the past, and that puts you in a great position at this point in time to consider that, which we'll get into momentarily. And of course, if you do make the determination to enter into the bond market, that turnaround time will be pretty quick, about 5 to 6 months. What this slide outlines really are just kind of the benefits and the costs of bonding. You see them clearly, don't need for me to look at all of it, but we're in a place of economic vitality. We have proven and we've reported to you that when a Blueprint project is constructed, or any infrastructure project that you may authorize at the county or the city, private sector investment usually follows that. So if you were to bond, and what a bond effectively does is it amplifies how much sooner you can bring a product or a project to market, you could capitalize upon that. Obviously, there's some inflation cost savings by considering bonding and moving projects up. We'll cover that. And Blueprint, obviously, our projects improve the quality of life in any number of ways. And so the faster we can do that, the faster we can improve the quality of life across all our regions of our community. The costs are really self-evident. It's debt financing. It's just the more you bond, the more you have to pay for it over time, and that comes out of your cash flow. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk just a second, and it's actually action item number 1. Commissioners, don't need you to make any motions as we go. I'll just highlight it, and then we'll come to it at the end, of course. But action item 1 acknowledges that you have 2 projects, 2 economic development projects. One is for $14.1 million in improvements to the airport. The second is $20 million for the convention center. Both of these are going to be covered at the workshop that goes deeply into economic development, including these 2 items on September the 20th. We're asking that you direct staff, and I note in the agenda materials you received some outreach from Florida State University talking about the importance of this, and we acknowledge that. What I want you to know is we're going to be ready to act on that, or present it to you to act on that September 20th. The second thing that I want to emphasize at this point is nothing that is being recommended to you today in terms of Blueprint infrastructure, options A, B, or C, would encumber your ability to bond at that time, should you decide to do that then. But all of that analysis, again, when it comes to the economic development projects, will come back before you on September the 20th.
Commissioner Lindley?
Mr. Chairman, I was probably in our Children's Service Council stupor when we had a briefing yesterday. But would you talk to me a little bit more about the airport gateway piece that's, we're going to talk about it more in September, and why? I was kind of...
The airport gateway we'll talk about today. It's the, I'm sorry.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say the airport gateway project actually will be discussed in what's presented before the IA today, because that's a blueprint infrastructure project. And so that is a component of what we will cover today. It's the two economic development projects that we're asking to delay until
This will be a part of the economic development piece.
No, ma'am, that's right. Yeah, the two economic development projects are the airport at 14.1 million
center.
and the convention center.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Fair enough?
Is that,
I look forward to talking about more.
Okay. So we're getting closer to talking about the projects. But first we need to just cover a couple of, or a handful of assumptions that really cover all of the various implementation plan options, and they're really important. Number one, as we covered before, and credit to the IA for getting started on this so soon in the process. Again, putting it before the voters 5 years ahead of schedule, beginning serious collaboration upon it 2 years even before that. All of that yields to the first bullet, which is this that's before you today builds upon your prior direction and action. So again, you've already prioritized all the projects before. You've determined to advance fund some of them, and then you've asked for this funding alternatives to come before you. And today you'll have the flexibility to look at options A, B, and C we're about to get into and make a modification should you so desire. But clearly, everything here before you today builds upon that prioritization. Two, all the remaining Blueprint 2000 projects will be funded as part of what we're discussing. I think that's important that we, fulfill that mission and desire and goal, and we do that. The third bullet I really want to highlight as much as anything else, because it's indicative of where we've come just in the last handful of years. And I see our TPA partners in the back, and our DOT partners are always with us. What's assumed in this funding plan, and it's no news to any of those individuals, is we've got a great relationship intergovernmentally with our state partners and with our regional partners. And what that means is the state really is in a position to take the lead role in funding state roads on this list. Because of that, we are in a posture, based on what we know today, where we can fully fund the list, and that's significant. So we're focused on funding local projects, really. And that's a tremendous flexibility compared with if we did not have the relationship. So to our DOT partners here in the room and wherever you are, we do thank you. The example of that really is the next bullet. We have allocated $5 million for Capital Circle Southwest. That's to do the above and beyond, but that leverages $114 million in state funds that they're working into their 5-year work program to get that segment done, and that's, we're extremely excited about that. Very quickly, we got 6 projects funded by annual allocation. No need to cover those here today. The examples are sidewalks and greenways and things of this nature. But that's programmed in as we move forward. And all of the options include a SIB loan for partial financing of Welaunee Boulevard. Okay, next. Okay, so let's get into the 3 options that have been presented to you today. Okay, I think there's no more clicks for this, right? Okay,
Do we
good
have a
deal.
commissioner who's called in?
I'm sorry?
We do have a
Do we have a quorum?
county now. I think.
yeah, we've got a quorum.
No, I
Okay.
just wondered,
Jimbo's going to.
he's going to, but he's not.
Commissioner Jackson, are you still on the line, sir?
Yes, Commissioner Jackson is still on the line.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
I wasn't sure if we needed to take that action during the workshop. You want to just go ahead and dispense with that? Okay, so we need to vote to allow telephonic participation in voting. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion by Commissioner Ziffer, seconded by Commissioner Nick Maddox. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all in favor? Patrick?
And Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, that's for the workshop and the IA board meeting.
Right.
Starting at 3.
Right.
Just one
Thank you.
motion.
Could you
Okay.
have our attorney clarify further the rules of voting by phone?
I'll be happy to address that,
Go ahead,
Mr.
Patrick.
Chairman. Commissioners that are permitted to participate, they're also permitted to vote. And we just ask that the chairman call for their vote after an item so that the minutes can so reflect their vote on the measure.
All right.
Are they allowed to break a tie and all that kind of stuff, or is it just, I mean, they vote as though they're here? Or?
Absolutely,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
The only distinction is that
Yeah.
they're not counted for purposes of a quorum.
Got it.
Right.
Got it.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank
Welcome
you.
aboard, Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you.
All right. Ben, you want to continue?
Yes, please. Okay, so now we're getting into the three options before you. So let's, and this might piggyback or pick up on some of your comments, Commissioner Proctor. So what we're looking at in these options A, B, and C are really the first 5 years of the full 20. Now, you do have, I believe, an attachment 4, a schedule that goes over all 20 years, and it shows how all projects are funded during that time. But what we're really focusing on is, okay, what can we do financially, prudently, and responsibly to elevate and escalate as quickly as we can the most projects into the first 5 years. Option A reflects a total investment of $186 million. It really is in line. It's sort of a pay-as-you-go. This is not a bond financing program. This is utilizing those dollars as they roll in year over year. And it includes the SIB loan. So what does that get done? Capital Circle Southwest, Welaunee Boulevard, fully funded by 2025, just outside the 5-year window. Repayment of DeSoto Winter Encampment, the Orange Avenue Meridian Placemaking Project, and the Market District Project. Next. Okay. So if you were to emerge into bond financing at a prudent first level, $50 million bond, you would pick up 2 additional projects. The total investment over the first 5 years is now $230 million, and you would pick up the Airport Gateway, funded in full, and the Northeast Gateway Welaunee Boulevard would now move into the 5-year window, so it would actually elevate or expedite a little bit sooner than in option A. Next. And the third option that's presented for your consideration today, again, well within your bonding capacity, but gets a couple more projects done. At $100 million, you would be able to pick up the Bannerman Road Northeast Connector, of course, as approved by the voters, as described and detailed in your project descriptions, and also the Monroe Adams Corridor Placemaking Project. Again, all of these build on the other as you go down, and the total investment, should you choose option C, $274 million going into capital projects within the first 5 years, or the next 5 years, I should say, of your blueprint program. Next. This is really just looking at the same data set a little bit of a different way. And what you can see here clearly is what is fully funded, what's partially funded from each option A, option B, and option C, and what is not yet funded. Now, I want to be very clear, and this also, I think, speaks in these tables to some discussion before. When we say not funded, what we mean is not funded in the first 5 years. These programs, these projects are funded over the life of the 20-year blueprint program. Next. Okay, so this really gets into kind of debt service. This is, again, looking at the summary options a little bit different way. You see A, you see B, you see C. But pay attention, if you would, to the debt service of each. So you see $6.9 million would be in option A, $24.9 million in B, $53.8 million in option C. Again, all of these are fully considered and worked through by staff. Bottom line, and sort of in plain language, we are very comfortable and confident in our ability to enact on any of these should you give this direction. It's well within your bond capacity. As you heard from PFM, it will not put you in a posture where that rating that is so good would be jeopardized. Would be put in play whatsoever. And you can see also in the graphic here how the total investment by years would cumulatively play into the marketplace.
Mr. Chair, I'll move option C.
Second.
Okay.
Now I get discussion.
Now, this will, the workshop, from the workshop, we will direct the IA staff to place this on the blueprint agenda when we meet as the blueprint board. And it's currently item 8 on the agenda, on the consent agenda. So this is just to direct staff to go forward with these recommendations. We will take it up at the blueprint meeting. We will ask for a motion to pull that item from the consent agenda because we have some from the public who want to speak on that item, and I want to give them the opportunity to be heard.
So I'll move to have that removed from the consent agenda so we can do that.
Okay, well, we'll do that when we get to the IA meeting. Right now, we're in the workshop giving them direction. So the motion then is to...
May we speak to it now?
Yes.
Good with that?
Yes. So the motion then is to give staff direction to move forward with these recommendations, which will be on the IA board meeting agenda when we gavel as the IA board subsequent to the workshop.
Point of clarification. So
I mean the blueprint. I said IA.
We're not picking a option. We're actually just giving them direction to place this on the agenda later.
No, the motion is to support option C.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which will be formally voted upon.
In the
At the
blueprint
blueprint
meeting.
meeting.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, it's a ratification item at your regular board meeting. So
Oh, it's
whatever
ratification.
action you take at your workshop,
We're simply
we're
ratifying.
gonna bring it back, allow public participation during the regular IA meeting, and then vote on ratification of the
Okay.
workshop.
All right. That clarifies it. Commissioner Lindley, did
Oh, well, thank you. Well, yeah,
Commissioner Maddox, Scott Maddox?
I think the advantage of the bonding ahead of time, and the third one, it's a higher cost in a way over the years, but it also starts creating jobs. It starts taking advantage of a lot of growth that's going on right now. People will see more of what their vote is doing, and so I think largely, though, to take advantage of getting these projects in so the infrastructure is there and the economic assets that are going up now and will be going up, we'll be able to take advantage of those and property taxes and everything else. So I think it's just a smart way to go ahead. The bond market is good, according to our experts, and in a nutshell, I think it's a smart thing to move ahead on the bond financing, not do the pay-as-you-go. So I'm all in on that.
Okay.
Interested to hear what others say.
I know we got the motion. Was there a second to the motion?
Yes.
Scott? Okay.
Commissioner Maddox.
Commissioner Maddox. Okay. Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to echo Commissioner Lindley's comments. We started in the 1990s advanced funding state roads and moving forward with bonded projects. It's hard to even think about or contemplate that at one time Thomasville Road was 2-lane, US 90 was 2-lane, Capitol Circle was 2-lane, all the way around. Those are all state roads, and it took local government advanced funding to get those things started. Today, if we had not taken those actions along with Blairstone Road and other new construction, we would be in a real mess as it relates to transportation, like we see other cities across America get stuck by not getting ahead of their infrastructure. I'm all for bonding the projects and moving forward because it will keep pace with the need. I do want to mention, however, and put on the record that as it relates to Wolani Boulevard, that we put in when we did our original prioritization. If you remember, we required the CNL portion to sign that they would pay for the road when it went through their portion. The city of Tallahassee would pay for the road when it went through their portion. And we put language in that says, funding to develop Wolani Boulevard from Fleischman to Shamrock and 2-lane Shamrock Way extension to Centerville to Wolani Boulevard North includes right-of-way construction, stormwater for roadway improvements. Projects shall be conditioned upon, number one, reimbursement by the developers to Blueprint for any developer-required transportation improvements, and reasonable payment timelines would be established. And number 2, any costs inclusive of right-of-way related to the greenway that may be used as a direct offset of any developer's required transportation improvement costs. Number 3, that the portion of the project involving land owned by the City of Tallahassee will only require reimbursement if sold and developed privately. And number 4, anticipated developer reimbursements are to be recognized as potential future resources for Blueprint. That I think we need to specifically say that in the record, remind ourselves of that as we bond this project forward, because those 3 segments are going to enable Blueprint to have money that'll go back into the coffers after everybody but Commissioner Daley will be gone. He's young enough to be there. So those dollars will continue to help projects.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Maddox. Commissioner Proctor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Each of these options is an unfair option with respect to those projects that are being recognized as funded to the first 5 years. So much so that option AB, if you want to look at how staff has scaled this, starts at a 14th spot before you get to Woodville Highway, a state road. Orange Avenue is a number 15 spot. But the option that's been motioned here, option C, takes those projects down to both 16 and 17 ranking. They lose ground under this effort. But Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm deeply concerned that for projects that for so long have been in line, several of these on the non-fundables, the untouchables, have are languished from a previous penny sales tax, and yet our staff brings us something that is untenable as an option. I can't see why, again, we're asking Southside region people to pay for a host of projects that are going to go in the upper tiers here and put $53 million that we're asking folk there to pay for, and we ain't got nothing that's going to be in the stocking coming soon to a place where you live, near you. This has to be reworked. This is unfair. This is not what has been promised. This is not the carrot at all that has been dangled for the support of citizens who overwhelmingly supported the Blueprint project that said that they would get some. We ain't getting nothing. We're going to sit here and watch everybody from Willani, Gateway to Northeast Connector, Bannerman Road to all across town. Here it is in black and white, and I ain't getting none. I want Woodville Highway on this list. Why? Because it was there before, and ain't nothing happening. And let's expand. I'm not trying to take anybody down. Let's put some more money and bond some more projects. Okay? If we can do $53 million, let's figure out what we got to do to lift the rest of them. Orange Avenue widening is absolutely been talked about since Moses was a little boy. The fairground beautification was on the last conversation. Been talking about it forever. It's merely $12 million. When will this occur? And I believe that we need to stretch this because we have overpromised, underdelivered to the people who have voted for this. And, you know, these words sound good, you know, to those who are familiar with them. I'm not. I just look at a sheet of paper that says, and if I'm to read all of the writing, projects not funded, not scheduled for funding in the first 5 years of Blueprint 2020. I got news. These are projects that have never been funded my entire life. And again, someone tells me on a sheet of paper at a table that I'm sitting at, they're not scheduled, just it's going to happen, but we can do better than that. I can't support any option that excludes Woodville Highway. I can't support this that would leave fairground beautification off the table and under the arc of safety for this bond project. And I'm asking, Mr. Chairman, for this board understanding how long and how strong the support from the people there that was promised. It was promised. It was written. And then we come to the first disbursement of monies, and folks, y'all wait. Just wait. In fact, we got no plans for y'all. Folks, this is not good enough. If we are trying to be inclusive, if we really do mean that we're one Tallahassee. We're one Leon County. If we're one, goddamn it, why we can't be a part of the oneness? We're not a part of it. I am excluded. These people are excluded, and this is not fair. And I don't know, staff, how you all arrive. Maybe it's governed by where you live. I don't know. Maybe it's by other factors. But if it's about need, and if it's about how long folk been waiting, how much money folk done put in the kitty, then this right here is neither equity, it's not fair, and I believe, and I'm asking, I'm making a substitute motion that Woodville Highway, the Orange Avenue, the fairgrounds, and the sewer for alternative sewer solutions be included in this because people have waited trillions of years. That's a motion option that we would expand the bonding capacity for those 4 additional projects located in the south end.
Okay. And before I accept that motion, do you want to respond to Commissioner Proctor's? Because I think he makes some valid points.
You need a second.
I know. I haven't accepted the motion yet. I won't be in to respond.
Happy to respond to the best I
Okay.
can. Let's start with this. Everything in your materials, everything that is covered and that you spoke to, is in line specifically with the funding prioritization that's been approved by the IA over time. So what you see is the elevation of those projects that are top ranked within their categories, wherever they may be. If they're a smaller project, which we call CCQ, which Fairgrounds is one, it gets funded, but it gets funded in order. What we've done is specifically within each category is start at the top, and as funds are available at the beginning, work down that list from the top. The other thing that we've done for the larger projects clearly and with success is aligning with the Regional Transportation Authority and with DOT. Woodville Highway is an example of that. And that's it. If you look at attachment number 1, page 1 of 1, you see the Southside Gateway Enrichment widening of Woodville Highway. And that's moving through the process. Correct me on this, Autumn. I'm going off memory, and that's dangerous. But they're already doing right-of-way acquisition. I think it's construction that is next in line for that particular project. But let me also just speak very, very cleanly in terms of option C, which is the motion that's on the table, and what are the projects that are included in it, and what are the projects that are not. So what you see right off the bat, the first one that we note is the full funding for Capitol Circle Southeast. So getting all of that done from basically all that's 2-lane, making sure that it looks like everything else.
Southeast or southwest?
Southwest, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Capitol Circle Southwest. Yeah, that's a good clarification. You do have Welaunee. Yes, you do have the Market District, but you also have full funding of Orange Avenue Meridian placemaking, the bus stop, the super stop. In option C included, you also have full funding for the airport gateway, which we discussed at the last meeting. And which includes, thank you, Spring Hill Road, Lake Bradford Road, Stuckey Avenue, etc. We're collaborating with FDOT on Orange Avenue. And then finally, if you do, option C is the motion on the floor. Yes, you do have Bannerman Road, which is on the north side, but you also have the Monroe Adams placemaking. And I tried to sort of acknowledge this in my initial presentation. The wording of not funded, it's not funded within the first 5 years. All projects are funded. If our partnership with the state continues, and it shall, and the state continues to pay, and thank you, state, who's watching this, for doing that, for your state roadways within our community, we will have the funds to get all of our projects done during the life of the program. What we've presented to you in these 3 options, and I thank you, Commissioner, for allowing me to do this. We will have elevated and amplified in the most financially prudent manner we can within our bond capacity, but not coming up against any point of diminishing returns, bluntly, where we're taking on just too much debt service and not getting it that much quicker on the calendar versus what attachment number 4 would show where it would get funded otherwise if we didn't bond for it. But that, Mr. Chairman, is just a little additional information, and
Thank you. I just have a question on point, and then Commissioner Ziffer, I'll get to you. Because it's my understanding that Orange Avenue is being worked on now, that there is a PD&E study actually already in progress.
Led by the state.
For Orange Avenue from Adams to Capitol Circle Southwest, Commissioner Proctor. So even though it doesn't show that that is being funded in the first 5 years of the blueprint money, the state is moving forward with that road widening. It's
Well,
desperately needed.
where the
as
money
you're
at? I don't see nothing that says that. It says,
Well,
not scheduled, not scheduled. I can see that. It says not scheduled.
If you look at page 70 of 20 in this document, at the bottom, where it says funding not currently identified, that's not currently identified within blueprint dollars. But where you see the state, Southside Gateway, Woodville Highway, that's in the state transportation plan. Same thing with Orange Avenue, the West Side Student Gateway, Pensacola Street. Those are all state.
Yeah, but these projects were also listed as blueprint projects, even notwithstanding that.
Right,
So,
but we're seeking state funding, and so that gives us more money to do blueprint projects.
you know, why are these projects not, what makes these projects have to wait? I mean, I heard Commissioner Maddox call the roll on state roads that got advance funded. He did a great job. I remember those roads. And what is it about these roads which likewise can't receive such advance funding?
But they're in the process now to be paid by the state.
So we're getting
They're-
state funding instead of
Yes.
having to get bonds.
Our local blueprint money.
Basically.
The state is funding.
I see what
fully
I see
funding.
here, what this sheet of paper has told me under every option is that these projects are, in fact, C drops them down lower than A or B, and that I can't understand what staff is thinking on these projects can't make get some money for right now. What makes these other projects get some money? Some of these projects were not even around. You know, the first 1, 2, 3 Cascade Trail and all this stuff didn't even exist. Magnolia Trail didn't exist. Woodville been existing a long time. The need for sewer been pre-existing these things. We're putting new, fabulous,
But
look good.
Woodville Highway is in the pipeline for state funding. Woodville.
It's a state road.
Yeah, it's a state road.
Today, we're talking about borrowing money for projects that don't have state money,
Right.
In a
Yeah.
nutshell.
I mean, there's a plan to take Tram Road all the way across to Monroe Street and then Woodville Highway.
That data should come in here with me because the only table I'm sitting at right now is some words that don't have no numbers. It don't
Okay.
clarify the state's posture to support or not be supportive. And what I'm looking, I mean, I can only go by what y'all give me
I
now.
understand. So if you want, I will accept your substitute motion. If there is a second, we'll act on it. But what I'd like, Ben, if you all would get that information that Commissioner Proctor is asking for to show him where the state is with respect to those projects that we're trying to get state funding for.
The state ain't got nothing to do with the fairground, so why ain't it in the top tier? Okay?
I think, Ben,
I mean, who in the world is setting this list? I mean,
okay,
this list
Commissioner
has been
Nick
set
Maddox
up-
on
Just
point.
real quick, as I understand it, the list was allocated due to those who were first in line in the subjects. I get that point. The thing that I was most concerned about, and I mentioned it to Commissioner Ziffer a second ago, is making sure, and I think this exists as I look at the list, is map equity.
Yes.
Does map equity exist when it comes to bonding to make sure that as much dirt is turning in all sections of Leon County as the other?
No, this ain't equity.
I'm asking, Ben.
Ben?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. I believe when you look at the list of projects and the ones that I've just named, what you see is two-part. Part one is equity around the community, given all the projects. And number two, and we talked about this when we discussed it in sort of deep dive, the airport gateway, a tremendous amount of investment in the southern part of our community.
Commissioner Ziffer.
Thank you.
I think, based upon the presentation by our bond counsel, and I think we all know what the federal government's spending money left and right like there is no tomorrow, interest rates are going up. And I can't even imagine what they may be 10 years from now or even 5 years from now. So the sooner we get this bonded, the better off we'll be. So whatever project we can move forward, I want to do that, and that's why I pushed option C.
Okay.
Chairman, why we can't put some more money on this bond? Why can't we expand that and lift the Woodville Highway project, the Fairground project, and the sewer, and some of these projects off the bottom? Why we can't expand it since the bonding rated, this is a great time, wonderful time?
'Cause
I
someone
want to be
else
a
is going
part
to
of the
pay for
wonderful
those.
movement. I want to be a part of the right now, wonderful time.
Yeah. Commissioner Proctor, do you want me to still carry forth your
Yes, sir.
substitute
Yeah.
motion? Okay, there's a substitute motion by Commissioner Proctor. Is there a second to the substitute motion? Is there a second? Okay, there's no second. Motion dies for lack of a second. So we're back to the main motion by Commissioner Ziffer. Are there any other questions? Commissioner Miller?
I noticed that the recommended actions are option 1, 2, and 3, and I wondered what the maker of the motion, his position on option 1 and option 3, are those, apparently those are not part of your motion?
I'm sorry, say that again.
It's just option C.
Under recommended action.
This is option C. The motion is for option C.
I think you're looking at
Well,
the,
actually, he said his motion was for option 2.
Option C. I
C.
said option C.
I think what you're looking at are the economic development issues that will
No,
take.
I'm looking at the end of our, page 19 to 20 of our agenda item, where it has option 1, option 2, option 3,
That's the-
recommended actions, option 1, option 2, and option 3. And your option for 2/C, that's why I'm asking for clarification, because as I understand it, your current motion on the table does not include any action to OEV about the September workshop on the airport or
Option
Commissioner-
2.
for utilizing funds.
Option 2.
Whatever. Pardon?
Option 2.
That's all you're moving.
Okay, Ben, would you explain
Yeah,
what
I'll be
we're trying
very
to
quick.
accomplish here?
There are three components to what staff's sort of requesting. One would be approval of option number 1, which gives OEV clear direction to work with FSU moving towards the workshop. Option 2 is pick from those A, B, C, or D, and you picked C.
Correct.
Which is great, and to clarify. And option 3 is just further preparation to hit the ground running effectively. It's utilizing Blueprint 2000
So I'm moving options 1, 2, and 3.
1, 2, and 3, yes.
Right. With C being the part of,
Correct, and C under 2.
Yes.
Acceptable to the seconder.
Okay, so the motion then is to accept options 1, 2C, and 3. And that is acceptable to
Thank
the
you for
seconder
clarification,
of the
Commissioner.
motion. Okay.
Again, I have one
Any
last
other
question.
questions? Commissioner Miller? Yeah.
I feel that it's important for Blueprint to have staffing, technical staffing, in order to monitor these projects. So this is going to put quite a lot of activity out there on the street at the same time. Obviously, it's not tomorrow, it's 4 years from now, but I am strongly recommending that you consider beefing up your staffing as far as project management is concerned, especially in the area of engineering for people who actually, when it says this, that, and the other, I couldn't even begin to tell you what it would say, because if it said it, I wouldn't, and all due respect to Autumn, she's not an engineer, and I don't think she really wants to handle every single one of these projects all at one time. So I
ever
think
wanna see
that
your
more
family
technical
again.
staffing to assist and maybe work under her direction would be advisable. So before I vote for that, I just wanted to make sure that I got that in the record.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say I strongly object to this arrangement, and the balance of my absence today, I want for the record, is a protest to the exclusion of the projects I've listed, that there is not map equity, that the people have voted for something with an expectation, as well as promises that they would be included with urgency, and that they are excluded for the first 5 years, whereas others are covered and spoken for. So many more are left unaccounted for. And so my presence in leaving today is a protest to say that I object to the inequitableness of what you're adopting.
And Commissioner Proctor, I would just tell you that, again, even the Woodville Sewer Project, there was a committee that was formed that is looking into that project and funding for that project. So it's not been ignored or excluded. What we're simply saying is there are other pots of funding that we will look at. The state has already said they will fund Orange Avenue, Woodville Highway, Tram Road, and so that saves us money to put more money into local projects. So it's not that those projects are, now the fairgrounds is another issue,
I understand.
but it doesn't rise to the level of being in that first 5 years. But the projects that you've outlined, other than the fairgrounds, they are being addressed simply by another funding source, but they're not being ignored. So I want to make that clear.
I get that, and I'm very clear with what you're saying, is that today I don't get none of the money that's being talked about. I get that. And that's being addressed. And third class citizens get addressed.
It doesn't, you don't get the money in the first 5 years, but this is a 20-year plan.
I get that.
Okay.
But
all
some,
right.
but some are getting it in the first 5. I just get none. I get it.
On
I
point,
understand that.
I'm sorry, on point, just real quick.
Commissioner
on point.
Maddox.
What
Just in the queue.
Nick Maddox
I'm
on
just in
point.
the
I
queue.
got you in the queue.
Yeah, I just later when we have this discussion later, can you have a map of where these projects that are in this 5-year plan are placed?
Yes, sir.
I don't want to be misconstrued that there's not map equity if there is, because that of course weighs into my decision to support this as well. So make sure in that discussion that you have a map prepared.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Sorry.
Well, this wasn't a part of my comment, but I hope my colleague would reconsider his departure. I think
he's gone.
I think the commissioner offers an important perspective here at the table. His protest from the table means that there's a district that elects a district commissioner to represent the interests of that district. And it is not just his voice alone that's silent. It is the voice of all of the people who have elected him for representation here. So if he's under the sound of our voice, I hope that he'll consider that. That's an important perspective at the table. My comments were going to be around, one, I think that it's important to, where possible, elevate, and keep people working in this community, and at the same time be able to elevate these projects forward. I also think that because these are some advance funded projects, that maybe we will have a little bit of time to do some community benefits agreements as a part of this work. And specifically, Commissioner Lindley and I, and at different points, Commissioner Miller and others have talked a lot about apprenticeships and making sure that the communities in which these projects are happening also get to benefit from the spend. And what I've noticed on a lot of our blueprint work is a lot of ways in which we meet our MBE pieces or around professional services. But there's a layer beneath that. For instance, who's on these construction sites? What are the size businesses that are able to participate? Sometimes they're not always the biggest ones, even though it's much more efficient that those folks are in position to be responsive to RFPs and so on and so forth. Because, again, we are not on a timeline that is a pressing one for any other reason than the fact that we made it that, I would ask that the staff be very creative about how we can meet some of our other objectives of this government to engage parts of our communities in the work being done here. Not just professional services, but who's doing the work. And that we have that as part of carrying this work out. I don't have a direct set of language that I would put into the form of a motion, but I would charge staff to be creative, that I'm actually thinking beyond what we have done on minority business and small business participation, to embrace some of what we have set as our goal to use some of the talent, make sure that it's trained, some of the apprenticeship opportunity to put people to work and to work with our vendors to help us meet that objective. And because we got the luxury of being on an accelerated or advancing some of this work, I think we have the room to be a little bit more creative here in meeting that. That would be for my vote in support of this, it is an accompaniment of trying to meet some of those objectives.
And Mayor, I agree with you wholeheartedly. As a matter of fact, that issue came to mind for me as our financing team representative was speaking, even with the financing of this. What kind of involvement was there in that? I mean, that's something that I've pushed for in the past when I was on the school board, and is important. And so I agree with you there.
Can I say on point to that, because the city commissioner has actually, I think, done a really good job in our bonding work that we've pushed the treasurer clerk to and his staff to also look at how in the bonding capacity that we ensure that we have diversity in who manages money, who lets these bonds. Highly qualified vendors all around the country who can participate at that level. I think we've got to do more than just the status quo as it relates to.
Sure.
If we're going to take this step to advance fund, if we're going to encumber resources early, then let's do it consistent with some of the other goals and objectives of the government.
Yeah, and maybe make some extraordinary steps rather than just the ordinary. Commissioner Miller.
Thank you,
and then Commissioner
Mr. Chair. I'm just very compelled. I was hesitant to step up and say this, but I've sat and listened to this year after year after year, and I will tell you that when there is discussion of people who feel like they have been left out, a lot of those people live north of the interstate. If you're walking neighborhoods up there, you'll find people who are angry, who look at the map. They can read maps just like we can. The geographic distribution point has been discussed at these IA meetings a number of times for this very reason, because we have invested a significant amount of money in the South Side, and we are intending to do it today again. That's good. Bottom line, though, there are a lot of people who are sitting there saying, we ain't getting nothing, as my colleague would say. I'm telling you, and a lot of them are angry. The people in Killearn, not the people, take it back, the Killearn board, who I'm not inclined to agree with on very many occasions, sits around and talks about de-annexation from the city. That's the level of frustration that you hear when you go anywhere north of I-10. So I will say that we have this time added that geographic distribution. We've all looked at the maps over and over. I don't know how many times you have to say that Woodville Highway is already being discussed at CRTPA regularly, and the funding, how many times, and you, Commissioner, know Orange Avenue because you have been a great steward of Orange Avenue. You know that that is being advanced forward. Progress is being made on all of these things. I don't know how many times you have to say it before it actually sticks, but it's not a case where nobody's getting anything. And in the action we take today, I guarantee you that most of those dollars are going to be spent finally in the southwestern section of the city, and the community, which is way, 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 way overdue. I mean, they have been, and poor Commissioner Jackson, where is he? He probably is happy to, I'm glad he's here. But the bottom line is that I just don't agree with these comments, and I just couldn't sit here and continue not to say a word about it.
Okay, well, I've got Commissioner Dozier, the mayor, and then Commissioner Ziffer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am fine with the motion as is. I apologize for missing the beginning of the conversation. I have some concerns about option C. I think raising interest rates, construction costs, other things compel me to get comfortable with it, but I think I will have some caution in the future. The debt service alone, and you all may have covered this, we start chipping away at our ability to complete all the projects. So just for my part, I'm there at this point. There's other compelling reasons. Appreciate the motion, but I think we need to be attentive to that in the future. And I agree with some of the discussion about, I think we have had some geographic distribution conversations in the past. It is challenging to have that all in the first 5 years of a 20-year tax. So I think we're working in good faith towards that. And I think the other parts, Woodville Highway and other things, show how far we've come in the collaboration, in our efforts towards better collaboration with CRTPA, with our state partners, with others in recent years. So really appreciate, I'm not even sure if we had all of that mapped out as clearly in past years. Of course, we came in the middle of the tax, or I did to the board, but I really appreciated that we even indicated it was state funding or other things like that. I think that's helpful to see that, so appreciate that. On the talent piece, Mr. Mayor, I'm glad you mentioned getting creative. And I just wanted to add a thought to what you said. It is always kind of a perennial challenge to, from my perspective, and I think for the boards in the past when this has come up, to add in any kind of employment requirements to our contractors, because we're also thinking, or any kind of vendors, because we're also thinking about our fiscal responsibility. There's a balance there. But I do think your suggestion to get creative and how far we've come with thinking about apprenticeship models, both in the business community and city and county, and with OEV being partnered with Blueprint 2020, this is a unique opportunity we've never had before. In my conversation with, whether it's TCC, with the building community, with others, and I'm sure you all have heard the same, there's a missing link between, and this is a lot to do with the state statutes and laws. Other states don't have this challenge. I'll nudge you on that. But there's a missing link between funding for training at, say, community college, and then the builders and other types of vendors who can employ that and keep those folks going as apprentice. If we could take the next 2 years on the OEV side and try to get creative on how to connect that, I think it would help in private sector construction projects. We're seeing a lot there. But then maybe it would be easier to do, for example, award points if you have an apprenticeship program or something. In thinking about our past conversations as you made your comments, I don't want to get to a point where we have the same challenges we've had before, but we have more ability to get creative, as you suggested, now than ever. So, and Ben, for our September workshop, I know you're already thinking about the talent. We've already got the one program, but maybe we could hone in with builders and contractors, their association with TBA, with others, and see if there's something that we could jumpstart in the next couple years in advance of this 5-year funding. So thank you for bringing that to mind, and I just wanted to piggyback on your comments.
Agree with you.
Okay. Thank you.
I agree. That wasn't my comment, but I think that's a great way. I didn't have language for how to codify it, but it is a strong sentiment. I won't go down the total rabbit hole on this, but I do think it's important to note that what we're dealing with are systemic generation-long inequities in funding. So this argument over one side versus another and who gets more resources, it takes only looking at infrastructure between various corridors to know the difference. And what equity is giving everybody what they need, not the same thing. And some people need $1.50, others need 50 cents, some need 25 cents to close the gap to get to equity. And so I think part of what we're doing is trying to build a community that, regardless of what corridor you're in, reflects the same, to the extent that the public investment has anything to do with, the same level of quality of life and experience that you can achieve. And I think that's, part of what these funding priorities, the map is always helpful, of course, but I'd never just direct my voting and decision-making based off of what quadrant gets what. I think that's not how we make our decisions. I think it is, how do we create more of a whole community, and one that you can't tell the extreme differences, certainly not in the public investment and in the public infrastructure based off the side of town. Now, houses may look different in different parts and different corridors. Different businesses may look different in different areas of the city. But from the public investment part, we ought to strive to be as indiscernible as we can be in that. And much of our resourcing, certainly of late, I think, is toward that end, how we make sure that we build whole communities that reflect a kind of quality of life in all parts of it that's of value.
Okay. Commissioner Ziffer?
Okay, I'm going to try to bounce off all my notes here. following the mayor's comments, the only thing I might add to that is I don't necessarily think that building roads in certain locations are going to all of a sudden create economic prosperity, because they're not, and we know that. And expanding upon what Commissioner Dozier said, and also you, Mayor, you know, one of the things that we know works are apprenticeships. You know, it gives, because it's not only an opportunity to learn, it's an opportunity to earn. It's an opportunity for young people who may not see a future for them, as many of us look towards our futures, because they've not been exposed to that, to be in a position where not only are they learning a trade, but they're also learning that someone just like them 10 years earlier is now making a living and is supporting a family and is able to drive a fairly nice car because they have gained this skill that they never thought would be enough. Carpenters, plumbers, electricians, all these trades are very successful trades when you have growth, but they're also successful when you have downturns, because people still need electricians and they still need plumbers and they still need tradesmen. So I would follow up on what both of you said, and that is I think we should look at developing some type of program through OEV. We have economic development dollars, and I would suspect this would fall under it, to develop a program so that we can have in place trades, so that when somebody has not only road building or these other projects we have, but major construction projects, they look to us to fill them and not to bring people in from out of town, because otherwise we lose on several different levels. There will be at some point through the U.S. Congress a jobs bill, and that jobs bill is going to have to include apprenticeships. Even our president has acknowledged that. So this is something that I would like us to focus on. I think there are other people at this table. I see a lot of heads nodding. We need to help people gain jobs that are not only short-term but long-term. We need to do more than just build roads. We need to build communities, and that's what we're trying to do. So while I do understand that there is a certain geographic need so that everyone that is paying in feels they're getting an appropriate amount back, the mayor is right. Unless we have success throughout the entire community, none of us will be fully successful. So if we could look towards that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Ziffer. And just as a closing comment, I guess, unless anybody else has any other comments, you know, there's two of us at this table that were a part of this process from its inception. Commissioner Miller and I were both on the original Economic and Environmental Consensus Committee, a small group of us that came together.
Well, Mary Ann was writing about it.
Mary Ann was writing about it.
I was reading about it.
Scott was voting on it.
And you know, we realized at the time that there were specific infrastructure issues that needed to be addressed in this community, and they were a priority. And the community decided to tax itself. We decided to tax ourselves to address those issues, and they were addressed. But if you look at the map, Commissioner Miller, there was not geographic equity. There was not. But it wasn't something I was ashamed of, because I knew we had to address those issues, and wherever you lived in this community and you paid sales tax, you paid towards those projects. But as we moved forward and we constituted the sales tax committee, you better believe that was first and foremost in my mind, that we were going to look at geographic equity and how we move forward with these projects. And I think we've done that. I feel comfortable that we have done that through our partnerships with the state, the projects that have been recommended for funding, those that are in this 5-year program. I feel comfortable that we will achieve that over the next 5, 10, and 20 years. If I didn't, I wouldn't support this. But I believe that. And what we're talking about in terms of participation, in terms of who is doing the work, what businesses are involved, that is just another commitment that we are making here to make sure that the entire community is involved now in this process going forward. And it's codified because it's part of a public meeting, the direction that we're giving staff to make sure that that happens. I'm sorry that Commissioner Proctor left in protest because like I said, I live on the south side of town. and I feel comfortable with the projects that are to be accomplished. And again, as I was trying to explain to him, it may not be blueprint funds over these next 5 years, but it's state funding that accomplishes the same thing. And so I want to make that clear to anybody who might be listening to this or have that concern. So with that, then we will ask for a vote on the motion if there is no more discussion or questions. So all in favor of the motion, do I need to restate it? No. Okay, all in favor of the motion then signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Okay, and Commissioner Jackson telephonically votes aye. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, then that concludes the workshop.
Yes, sir.
Ben?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The regular scheduled meeting of the IA is scheduled to begin at 3 p.m., so we have a recess, I believe.
Okay.
You can adjourn.
So at this point, we will recess the meeting of the Blueprint Board until 3 p.m. sharp, and at that point, we will reconvene as the intergovernmental agency to take up a comp plan amendment.